If you are pregnant and you are shopping for a breast pump right now, but feeling very overwhelmed by all of the options on the market, first of all, so relatable. I remember this like it was yesterday. So I'm going to share a framework that my doula shared with me when I was going through this myself in hopes that it helps at the very least narrow down the options by figuring out which sort of category you're going to fit into. And there's three. And take it all with a grain of salt because there's nuance to this, okay? Question you need to ask yourself, and this is hard to do when you're pregnant because you don't really know what's coming, but in an ideal world, how often are we going to be relying on this pump? Are we going to be using it every single day, exclusively using it, occasionally using it? Because which one you fall into kind of helps dictate which pump category you should look into. So the first category is the person who is going to occasionally pump. You're not going to pump every day. You're not going to exclusively pump. You're mostly pumping just to build a stash in your fridge or freezer, for example, for date nights, if you have to step away, but you are 99.9% of the time going to be nursing. In this instance, the pump is more of a convenience tool, and a wearable pump is a really good option for you because they're super convenient, but many of them are not as efficient at removing all of the milk. Again, there's nuance to this because there are a couple that I've seen pop up recently that are now marketed as hospital strength. So you need to do your research on this, but many of the ones that I initially was looking at were not. You don't necessarily need a really strong pump because you're not going to be using it all the time. You're not even going to use it daily, okay? The second category is the person who is pumping every single day, but still mostly nursing. That is the category I personally fell into. I pumped every single morning and then nursed the rest of the day. And the reason I pumped every day was because I wanted to free up some time for myself. And the only way I could do that was to pump, have a little bit of milk on hand to put in the fridge that my husband could use to feed our son, at bed or whatever. Like, the schedule depends on your circumstances. But I found when I was initially breastfeeding all the time that I was just trapped because I needed to feed him constantly. So that was the only way I could get a little bit of freedom. So in that case, I got the Spectra pump. I got the S1, the blue one. It's portable, which was nice because I could take it if I wanted to go do this somewhere else. I didn't have to sit by an outlet. There are other options that fall into that category as well. But just think of like an electric traditional pump. So think of it this way, like the pump is not necessarily in this category a convenience tool. It's more a way to consistently supply your baby with milk every single day, however much that ends up being. And then the third category is somebody who is going to exclusively pump, or, and I know this is hard to know when you haven't had your baby yet, but somebody who has supply issues or who has latch issues and wants to exclusively pump. Fun fact, I've never shared this on here, but I had a preeclampsia scare after I had my son. I had to go back to the hospital and I used a hospital grade pump, a Medela, I think it was called the Symphony or something like that. Anyway, that thing was a beast, like insanely strong, so much milk. It was crazy. In this category, removing all of the milk is a priority because your baby is not going to be doing that for you. So you want a really, really strong one. I do have friends that exclusively pumped that used like the Spectra, for example, and that did work for them, but just to like kind of help build a framework. So I don't know if this was more confusing than helpful, but my best piece of advice is to just choose the pump that fits the best with your routine, not necessarily because it's trendy or because you've been seeing other people talk about that pump. You want it to fit in with your life. So again, this is where the nuance comes into play, but that was kind of the basic framework that my doula provided me with that was helpful in determining which category of pumps to look into. And then of course, make sure that it is sized correctly because regardless of which pump you choose, if it is not the right size for you, it's not going to work. So all of that research will be for nothing. Measure your flange size, order your flange inserts, get those ready to go as well. That will make a huge difference. Hopefully this provides a little bit of guidance as far as how to filter which sort of pump to look into, and that this didn't add more confusion to your play because I know how confusing it is. Anyway, okay, let me know if you have questions.